see the gridlock and we're frustrated with it. And, even Supreme Court Justice Scalia, before he passed, mentioned how our founders set it up to where, with the separation of powers, it would be very, very difficult to get anything done because it's very difficult to pass legislation. In a unicameral legislature where there's just one house, it's difficult. In a bicameral legislature where there's a House and a Senate, it's incredibly difficult. And then separately, you have the executive office where if the bill passes, it goes on to the president, or here in Texas to the governor, and there has to be approval there. In the British Parliament, if they don't like the Prime Minister, the Parliament can just have a vote of no confidence and remove them. Some might call that impeachment. Anybody heard of that lately? Who here believes that it's healthy for this nation or this state to weaponize impeachment in repetition and to usurp the will of the voters that have just been cast in the last election? Who feels like that is the right direction for?
We can do better, we will do better, but we'll only make it happen if you are informed. That's what we're here to do.
America shines when you're connected to Aubrey Shines. Here's your host, Aubrey Shines.
Hello and welcome to America Shines. I'm your host, Aubrey Shines. Every day, hundreds of millions of dollars in American taxpayer money are spent on costs directly associated with legal, or should I say illegal, immigration. Only a small fraction of these costs are ever recuperated from taxes paid by illegal aliens, with the reset falling on the shoulders of American citizens and legal immigrants. Our aim today is to show the American people the fiscal burden of illegal immigration at every level and across nearly all aspects of life. These costs range from emergency medical care to in-state tuition, from incarcerating illegal aliens in local jails to federal budgets that pay out billions in welfare every year. Because there are so many different ways that money is spent on illegal aliens at both state and local levels. The information in our report is otherwise hard to find or even intentionally hidden. Today's show is meant to highlight spending related to illegal immigration while American citizens deal with uncertain economy. As you will soon see, not all of the costs are financial. Here with us to open the program is Simon Hankinson of the Heritage Foundation. Simon, thanks so much. Love, by the way, what Heritage is doing. I have to say, in full disclosure, through the years, I've been to Heritage many times, worked and did some work there, not directly, but making sure that there was a connection, because I believe what your foundation is doing is paramount to the success of every American. So again, Simon, thanks so much for taking time to address our audience. Let's go to the top of this here. I think I enumerated a few facts in the monologue that I hope are clear. Let's talk about the educational impact financially that unfortunately falls on the shoulders of Americans. Simon.
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me. Yes, the best estimate I've seen of the cost of illegal immigration in the United States, that's costs over revenues, is $150 billion. And about half of that, about $80 billion, is in public school education. We've got about 6 million children of illegal aliens or illegal alien children going to public schools all over the U.S., over 1 million in California, 1 million in Texas, and then the rest spread all over the country, right down to little West Virginia. And many of them, in fact, a very small percentage of them speak English at a proficient level. So, of course, it requires a lot more money spent on what they call limited English proficiency. There are about almost 400,000 teachers specializing in just this. So there's that massive financial cost, and the federal government only pays 1% of that. The states and the cities pay the rest. And then you have all of the associated costs and the things that aren't financial. So if you have a class with 30 kids and 5 of them or 10 of them don't speak English at a level that they can participate in the class, that's the teacher's resources and additional teaching resources that have to be diverted away from math and science and English towards English as a second language. And if you look at the national test results, the national report card, they call it, the NAEP website, you see the really horrific results of illiteracy and innumeracy across our country.
You know, Simon, again, you're raising some points here that so many of us are very, very concerned. And in another segment of the show, Simon, I'm going to address some of the humanitarian issues. I know that America, we have always been the #1 leader to really helping everyone across the globe, whether there are tsunamis that happen, etc. But on this issue right here in America, you just said something, and I want to kind of stay there for a moment. So if then, Simon, our test results are being lowered because individuals cannot speak and articulate English, then how is that impacting then our kids that are here naturally? In other words, American citizens, if our overall tests are plummeting because of this, why are we not hearing more about this, in your opinion? Why is America's media silent on these issues since it's harming our kids? Simon.
Well, I think the American media is, by all accounts, overwhelmingly left of center. So when it comes to immigration, they really dislike covering the issue when it's negative. They only try to highlight the positive. And there's a lot of positive things about immigration. I'm an immigrant myself. I believe in legal immigration, as do most Americans, certainly people at the Heritage Foundation. But they cover the aspects that they want to. They don't cover the costs, which at the moment far exceed the benefits, given that we have an incredible number of illegals. I think last month it was 300,000 being encountered at the border, significant number, of probably over half released into the country. We had 400,000 unaccompanied illegal alien children, many of them actually not under 18, but leave that aside, since Biden took office. Now, where do those 400,000 children go, and who pays for it? The taxpayer pays for it. It spreads out across the country. And of course, they're not entirely or even mostly to blame for the low standards in our schools. That's to do with the teachers' unions, lack of discipline, family issues. You could go on and on. But it's certainly not helping. And the more we have to divert resources to cope with this emergency created by the Biden administration, the less we can concentrate those resources on fixing our own house.
You know, I had one of your colleagues, Simon, E.J. Antoni, and my friend Dave Brandt there at Liberty University, and we were talking about the financial impact, you know, on this. And you put out a number there. You're talking about in the hundreds of billions of dollars that illegal immigration is costing American citizens, Mr. and Mrs. Taxpayer. Have you guys done a study on how would that actually break down? Case in point, if a family is making $80,000, $90,000 a year, and they're trying to raise their kids to be great citizens, etc., how does that impact Mr. and Mrs. Taxpayer? What kind of percentage are they seeing taken away from them, or they're having to spend on someone that shouldn't be here in the first place? Simon?
It would be very difficult to break it down into specific figure per family, but let's just say a figure I saw on a billboard yesterday that the average every American on average owes about $100,000 if you take the national debt of whatever 33 trillion and spread it around. And all of the spending that the Biden administration is doing on illegal immigration, from FEMA grants to housing, education, transportation, all of the Homeland Security resources that are being diverted, that money's on the never never. That's just a check that's being written against our children and grandchildren. It's debt. It's all deficit spending. So every American family is being dug into a deeper and deeper hole of debt that we're either going to have to pay off through with real money or with inflated money, as seems to be the case under this current government.
You know, I'm really concerned again, and I want to stay with this, Simon, here for just a moment longer, because again, I've looked at the figures. I've looked at a lot of the figures that are out, and again, some from the colleagues here, where you guys are at Heritage, and some across the board as well. And when I look at this, case in point, since Biden has taken office, the average American, somewhere between $7,000 to about $11,700, we've had to add to our lifestyles. Not just talking about increase of food and rent and mortgage, et cetera, et cetera. This is all part of this narrative. Again, not that you advocate we turn a blind eye to people that want to be here. I would want to be in America. I've traveled the world, and I can tell you there's no reason I wouldn't want to be here. But I'm looking at Americans shouldering this responsibility on something they didn't ask for. When you hear something like that, what does it do to you guys? You guys are there. You're in the trenches. You're dealing with the numbers. How do you guys process this? Simon?
Well, I'll put it as simply as I can. You cannot have open borders and a welfare state. It just simply doesn't work. We have, in the United States, accepted the premise that anyone from anywhere in the world can cross over our border on the pretext that they're going to claim asylum and then immediately tap into benefits that they haven't paid for, and that we are borrowing money to pay for. So the long-term prognosis of this is really pretty dire. It costs a whole lot less money for the United States to support refugees and people experiencing hurricanes or any kind of natural disaster overseas in their home countries or in other countries on the way than it does for them to be supported in the United States. So we're going about this completely the wrong way.
Let's come right back, Simon. Let me jump in here. We got to take a hard break. I want to come right back to Simon Hankerson. We'll be right back with Simon. Stay tuned.
Shouting the battle cry of freedom.
Today, Simon Hankerson is really kind of helping us kind of pillage through the numbers here. Again, we're going to talk about in just another segment or so the humanitarian portion of it. I've had so many to write and say, well, you know, how can we turn our blind eye and how do we do this? And what about the kids that are there? And we'll talk about the legal element of that as well and the impact. But I want to make sure that we lay the proper foundation here, because at the end of the day, if we cannot afford to do what we're doing, then none of us are going to benefit from this. Simon, I want to bring you right back in here. I've had a chance through the years to do a lot of work some in our penal systems as well. And now looking back in retrospect, I'm thinking about the amount of individuals that are here legally that are now in our federal and our state prisons. And again, we've done the numbers here, in my opinion, pretty well over the last few years. And we're looking at anywhere from 30, in some cases, $70,000, $80,000 that falls on the taxpayer taking care of people in our prison systems, that if they were not here in the first place, that burden would be lifted. Tell us and share with us, Simon, the research you guys have done there at Heritage on this illegal immigration as it relates to our prison system. Simon.
Well, just to give you one number, there's something like 400,000 convicted criminal aliens on ICE's, that's Immigration and Customs Enforcement's, non-detained docket. That means these are people who were here illegally, they committed a crime, they were arrested, they were convicted, they did their time at, as you say, whatever, $30, $40, $100,000 a year in prison, and now we're not devoting the resources to getting them back where they belong. So if you take those people and send them back to wherever they come from, then you're taking that risk off the American streets and putting it back into the country where it belongs. Look at the 5 million rough estimate people that have been let into this country under President Biden, about whom we know almost nothing. We have no background checks, no vetting, no nothing. They could give us a fake name, fake date of birth, could have a long criminal record. Take a city the size of D.C., not even 1 million people. We have 200 murders already this year. And a lot more shootings. Chicago, they have about 10 a weekend. So in a population of 5 million that consists of more young men than it does of women and families, you're going to have a percentage who are criminals, who are going to commit crimes in the United States and then be prosecuted, put in prisons at our expense, and then released into our communities. So we're paying really on both ends for this immigration crisis.
You know, I'm listening to you when you mentioned some of the cities that are unfortunately running rampant with this level of crime. I'm an ex-Chicago guy, went to high school, college, that's there. And again, even in the Humboldt Park area, the level of illegal immigrants that are there, the number is almost untold. In Chicago, you're right. It's not just 10 a week. They're experiencing on an average somewhere between 30 and 40 shootings. And again, that's not police officers killing black and brown people. These are black and brown people killing black and brown people. And unfortunately, we do have mayors, unfortunately, city aldermen. They are very reluctant to even share that information, which portion of that percentage are individuals that are here illegally. And I'm listening at you, and I'm thinking about the resources. Again, I keep going back to this. If Americans are shouldering the burden of people that shouldn't be here, I almost liken it, Simon, to if someone were to break into my home and now I'm forced by law to take care of people that have broken into my home. I have to feed them. If they're in trouble, I have to bail them out. What would happen to my own children, my own grandchildren, nieces, nephews, etc.? Is there any, in your opinion, are we seeing, hopefully, the light at the end of the tunnel? Is this going to end soon, in your opinion, Simon?
I don't think we're seeing the light. I think this administration is going to drag on for another year and a half, and they have no intention of changing course, as far as I can see, until they're threatened by losing an election. What I do think is happening that's a positive thing is that people are starting to see the consequences of their lawn signs and their platitudes and the blank checks that they're writing. You can say no human being is illegal, that's fine, but what about when they're camping out in your basement or in your backyard or in the middle of the park, in the middle of your city? Then you might start to think, well, okay, they're not illegal as a person, but they're doing something illegal and they should be punished for it. And I think increasingly people in cities, not just conservatives, but Democrats and liberals, are noticing that if you don't enforce criminal statutes, you don't lock away dangerous people, then someday they come for you. And if you don't enforce our laws at the border and try to support legal and not illegal immigration, then eventually you dilute the value of citizenship in your country. You dilute your standard of living, your education, your health care, and everything else that makes being an American better, quite frankly, than being a citizen of any other place.
You know, I'm looking at guys like Eric Adams and some of the others at once, like the governors there in New York. You know, they were once this great beacon of sanctuary city, sanctuary state. And now that they're feeling the brunt of what places like Arizona and Texas have been feeling for a very long time, all of a sudden they want a timeout. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at even the mayor there in the city of San Francisco saying, hey, we got to stop. This is too much. They're even going far at this point to say, hey, we need to even start doing drug tests to make sure that whatever entitlements we're giving out, it's not going for nefarious reasons. I think that's a conundrum and an oxymoron within itself. But with that being said, I'm looking at this, and again, I'm going back to the American citizen, because as an American citizen who loves this country, I don't know how long we can continue to do it. Obvious, our current administration, they have their own purpose, and we've addressed that on other shows, and will continue to shine the light on those issues. You're talking about an awakening. People are seeing it. Democrats as well as conservatives that have been espousing, hey, we need to close our borders. And again, we understand our current Congress, they're saying we're going to do something in this budget to make sure, while we're sending billions of dollars to European nations like the Ukraine, we're not securing our own borders, but we're paying to secure their borders, but it's not here. What message, Simon, would you give to the Americans in this nation right now, if you could say, here's a bad reason, even though I think you've eloquently done so already, but if you had to bring a summary into this, why and what would you say to the American citizens that are watching to say, we got to stop this because it's hurting all of us? Simon.
Look, we have tried this experiment of not enforcing laws and seeing what happened, and the results are not good. They're not good in our cities with the high crime, and they're not good at our border with a basically unlimited number of people coming over. The Biden administration's approach of throwing billions of dollars at so-called root causes in the home countries hasn't worked. The CBP-1 application and the ridiculous stretches of the law that they've used for parole and other programs and temporary protected status, they haven't worked. It's time to be grown-ups and to accept that you can't save everybody in the world, and that we should do what we've always done, which is to be generous and to be giving, but we also need to preserve our national sovereignty and our unique existence as the United States, and we have to end this insanity at the border, this socialist experiment that is clearly failing, and honestly I think is supported by a tiny fraction even of the Democratic Party. Forget about the country as a whole.
You know, I hear you loud and clear, Simon. And again, I'm being redundant and very repetitive for a reason. I've learned through the years that when someone continues to hear something over and over, it's almost like a jingle. You never get it out of your head. It's there, even when you're not thinking about it. And I think it is time for Americans to really understand this is not about what political party you're a part of. Unfortunately, there is one political party that seems to for obvious reasons, for voting reasons, etc. They want individuals in. But when we're bringing individuals in, and they're coming from places, I don't care where those places are, if it's a socialist background, socialist ideological bent that these individuals are coming in, then they're going to also expect it because, again, they're not able to contribute. And I have to say this, Simon, because I have so much pushback on things of this magnitude. It was actually Barack Hussein Obama that once said in his book, I read it, he says, when you begin to allow illegal immigration to saturate our nation, he said, it actually deteriorates black and brown and poor white people in this nation because those jobs are now being taken over by those who are here illegally. Simon, in the last few words here, would you reference or would you comment rather very quickly to Barack's statement on that matter? Was he correct or incorrect?
Absolutely, he was correct. And in fact, the Democratic Party and all of our Democratic presidents going back to Clinton and beyond have always believed that they have to do their job. They swore an oath to uphold the Constitution and to enforce the laws. Look at a speech by Joe Biden from his '88 campaign or from him as a senator. Any time in his career until about the last 5 years, he may have wanted to change the law in certain ways, maybe add people here or there, but there was never a question that he had to do his duty and enforce the law.
Simon Hankerson, Heritage Foundation. Hey, again, we're going to make sure that you guys are just plastered with everything that we're doing. We love the work that you guys are doing. Love Heritage Foundation. We're going to make sure that Simon's info is put up. I have another guest coming, and we're going to talk about some of the humanitarian dynamics that involve illegals that are here illegally. And we're coming right back with that guest. Stay tuned. I always get excited when individuals with particular acumen come on and they're able to give us data. I love statistics. I love individuals' opinion, but what I've learned in life is opinions change and they can be driven by simply our pure emotions. That's not who our next guest is here. Laura Reese is someone that I think every American should really make sure they get locked into, because as Director of Border Security, I think they have an insight that unfortunately a lot in our legacy media, they won't take time to share it with us. And often when we hear information like what Laura is about to share with us, we're called bigots or racist, xenophobic. Unfortunately, calling us names doesn't change the facts. And this is what we do every week here. We shine the light on the facts. That's all that we want. And after we do so, then you can make up your own mind which area and how you're going to sway. And if the pendulum swings you one way versus another, that's entirely up to you. Our job is to make sure that you have the data. Laura, thanks so much for joining us today. I think this is such an obvious paramount issue that's going on. I've read your background extensively, And I love the body of work, very candidly, that you've done and that you do, because this is impacting all Americans. What our legacy media, Laura, is trying to do, they're trying to pit us against each other, whether we're brown or we're white or male or female. But I approached this personally as a Christian, but afterwards I approached this as an American citizen and the impact that it's having on every American citizen, regardless of what camp he or she is in. This is a very, very serious issue, and it's destroying the very fabric of our nation. Laura, am I overemphasizing anything? Have I gone too far in my brief monologue? Laura?
Sadly, you're not overemphasizing it. The numbers that we are seeing of people and the drugs crossing during the Biden administration has broken every record, and all of them bad. So far, Customs and Border Protection has encountered about 7.3 million illegal and inadmissible aliens. Just this fiscal year so far, they have seized about 25 kilograms of fentanyl. And just so your viewers understand how deadly fentanyl is, if you think about the equivalent of 3 grains of salt, that can kill one person. And 1 kilogram of fentanyl can kill 500,000 people. And so at 25 kilograms seized so far this year, that would kill about 13 million people, which is the population of Pennsylvania, the 5th largest state in this country. So between the drugs and the known and suspected terrorists that are getting away, and just the volumes of people, ask New York City. They can't handle the numbers, and the numbers they've received are a drop in the bucket compared to, say, Texas.
Laura, you kind of took my breath away. I know the data, but it seems like every time I hear the data, unfortunately, it's almost like a punch in my gut. I've watched some of the films. I've looked at the impact when some of our great men and women of police uniforms, that they accidentally touch someone that has this drug on their person, how they go into immediate drug overdose themselves. Would you take a moment one more time and give us the metaphor again, or the symbolism rather, of the grain of salt? Say that one more time. I really want that to sink into our audience. This is what's coming across our borders that we're not inviting here. Laura?
Right. So the fentanyl equivalent of 3 grains of salt can kill one person. And so that is why we see these cases where if someone just touches another person or comes in contact with it, it can seriously injure a police officer, for example, or even outright kill them. And so unfortunately, we've lost 70,000 young people in particular to fentanyl in 1 year, because often they think that they are taking another medication. They order something online, a friend gives them something at a party to reduce their anxiety. So many of these drugs are laced with fentanyl, and it's killing them outright. And so the growing number of families losing loved ones to fentanyl is needlessly increasing. And occasionally the Biden administration will talk about fentanyl. It will give it lip service as an issue, but nobody will say the obvious solution, and that is secure the border and shut off the flow.
Laura, it's frightening. I was at one of the film debuts that showed that in D.C. a few years ago, and it was shocking. It was shocking to see, and we've done a lot of work, not just here in Tampa, but when I was in Chicago, I watched the unfortunate impact. And when I hear this, and again, obviously for political reasons, our media, and I mean legacy media, they won't touch this subject because it ties into their politics, unfortunately, but it's killing Americans. So when you say over 70,000, my little ticker just exploded. I'm thinking about the men and women that we lost in the Vietnam War. I'm thinking about the men and women that we lost in the Iraq War. 70,000 in 1 year trumps both of those numbers. So we're losing catastrophic numbers, American citizens, boys and girls, to a drug that could be prohibited from coming here if we simply close the border. Why then, with this information, Laura, in your opinion, why won't they close the border just for that reason alone, Laura?
Well, the administration's made it clear that they want this border open. I mean, every time a state tries to protect its own citizens and put up barriers, whether it was Arizona's last governor putting up shipping containers along the border, or Texas putting up the river buoys, then the feds, this administration, swoop in and sue the state and demand that they remove those barriers. I mean, the administration would be more honest if they just came out and said, we want an open border, because every action they take shows that. And so there's a hierarchy here. And while they will sometimes talk about fentanyl, and they'll throw some money at fentanyl and investigating it and treating it after the fact, again, they will not close that border. That is of utmost importance to them.
You know, Laura, I'm coming right back with you because I want to stay here for just a moment longer. Laura, when back in 2015, I traveled with then candidate Trump, and I would hear him talk about things of this magnitude as we would go from state to state. Individuals like Donald Trump was called a racist. I, being with him, speaking on and for him, I was also labeled a white racist. I'm not sure how they did that part, but I was a racist for just talking about it. Laura Reese's finger is on the pulse on these issues. When I come back, we have some questions, and I think it's going to shine the light on it. We'll be right back. Laura Reese is the board of director and part of Heritage Foundation, which is, you always hear me say this, I love Heritage. I love the work. I've known some of the key guys, girls there in the last 8-9 years personally. And I think Heritage Foundation has always just been, in my opinion, always on top of this here. Laura, I want to go right back to this. I asked you this off air.
President Ray was like, they're not really after Trump. They're after you. He's just in the way. Now, but think about it. What is it now? I think it's total offenses, what, 750 years plus the death penalty. I mean, that's kind of a big one. No, in some of the claims against my father. I mean, he's a young and vibrant man, but, you know, it's a long time. You don't think that them doing that to him is designed to send a message? You don't think that, like, it's like, well, no, it's different for him because he did all these things. Again, they've all been disproven, just like Russia was. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Stick you in a New York jury with this, and we'll make sure we cherry pick the worst possible judge in the world. It doesn't matter if he's been thrown over every time on appeals. They got the appeals court too, and if you're on a jury, you know, even if you think it's ridiculous, is it worth your social credit score going down in New York where you'd be thrown out of your schools? You'd be tarred and feathered in a PTA meeting if you're the actual person on the jury that was like, listen, it doesn't seem like there's anything wrong here. You know, again, it's not like we haven't been doing business in New York for 30 years. It was only when we put the little R next to our name that it changed. You know who I did my first political fundraiser for ever? And this is a hard one for me to actually admit out loud, but Andrew Cuomo. Yeah, no, seriously. His mother and my grandmother used to sit next to each other in the hair salon in Queens growing up. And if you're in New York real estate and it's the attorney general, that's the person that literally has to sign off on every one of your offering plans, right? You build a building, you're going to sell unit 502, they've got to sign off on it. That's how the system works. You have to play that. I've been a lifelong conservative. It doesn't matter. My first political fundraiser was for him because that was the way it worked. We understand all these things. Trump understood all those things. That's when he called out Hillary. Like, oh, you're yakking about all these things, but like you did nothing to change them because your donors do exactly what I do. I'm just man enough to call it out. I'm not going to be the hypocrite about it. But in those areas now, whew, you know how to stop the looting in Philadelphia? Give everyone a MAGA hat. Look, come on. They'd be in jail in less than a minute. But, you know, now I read the headline. It was this week. I think it was the looting in Philadelphia was because people needed, they were looting for bread. I'm like, last time I checked, and I don't go there often, but my daughter does, Lululemon doesn't have a lot of bread. Because I'm looking at the store, I'm like, there's not a lot of bread in a Lululemon. There's not a lot of bread in the Gucci store, and yet everyone seems like, unless you're eating Gucci loafers, which you're probably not. But this is the insanity, you know. I remember mostly peaceful protests in the summer of love of 2020. At least that's what I was told. It didn't seem like that on TV, but I'm not an imbecile. Because there were buildings burning in the background, but it was mostly peaceful. Then the reporter who's saying it's mostly peaceful gets hit in the head with a brick. I'm like, doesn't seem mostly peaceful. But again, it doesn't matter. So that's why we have to get involved. Guys, I get it. They've made it very difficult for people to want to stand up because you get picked out. They'll target you. They'll go after you. They're going to make it uncomfortable. You know how much more uncomfortable it's going to be if they win? You know how much more uncomfortable it's going to be for your children when they don't have, let's call it the freedoms I guess we thought we had. It's not real, right? Just like, again, you know, even me, even with what they were doing, it took me a while. I will say, you know, one of my biggest regrets, like early in my father's presidency, was like, as I mentioned, it was like, you know, when they tried targeting General Flynn, because I'm sitting there like, wow, the FBI said it, the CIA said something, there must be something to it. But I knew the man, and I was like, fine, I'm not going to come out against him, but I'm also not going to be in there fighting and defending because like, there's got to be something to it. And again, there doesn't have to be anything to any of it. So what we have to do is we have to get uncomfortable. We have to be unafraid. If they can put out one man by himself, they can take him out. They did it to the most powerful man in the world. They did it to my father. Now again, all of those things are lies, but it doesn't matter. Just like all the conspiracy theories that are proven true, we sit there and I get on Twitter and I'm guilty of it myself. I'm not pretending I'm immune. Ha, see, we were right. Ha, you guys are stupid. We knew all along. But guess what? They got what they wanted out of each and every one of their lies. Again, there's no consequence to being wrong. There's no penalty. None of these people get their lives back, their homes back, the years they spend in prison back, the tens of millions of dollars blown on legal fees to fight these things. Just because something's BS doesn't mean you don't have to deal with it. And 2 years later, Fauci was working for the Chinese and taking money there and lying before Congress. Oh, it's different, right? It's fine. We need to get in the game. We need to get together. We need to be fighting the same battles. We need to take the wins when we can get them. And that's why it's important for us to all get together right now and actually start fighting this battle. They're loving what's going on right now. You know, the consultants that are being paid very heavily. I saw this most out of Ron DeSantis' campaign because, you see where the money goes. It's public information. When big consulting firm, they take $60 million profit. Like a billionaire donor gives, these guys take 25% of the ad buy for every commercial that's run, 25% of the placement. It's their creative agency that's making the ad. That's another 20%. It's one giant grift. And we're seeing it again. The reason people in the single digits aren't polling, well, I can leverage this into a cabinet position. I can leverage it into a book tour. I'm not sure what Chris Christie's doing. Maybe he likes the free meals. Listen, if you're Chris Christie, that's probably a significant motivator. It's not going anywhere. He was very proud of his Donald Duck comments the other night. I was like, really? Like your nickname is Krispy Kreme and Butterball. Those are your two, no, well, that's literally behind closed doors, that's what people called him for years. I'm like, those are your names? And the best you can do is Donald Duck? I'm like, we're shaking in our boots now. I like Donald Duck too, but my name's Donald, so it makes it a little, I guess I'm sitting there being like, it could be worse, but this is going to keep going. And what they're going to make sure they do, and why the Democrats are loving it, and why Joe Biden is posting Ron DeSantis clips, talking about inflation, is because they don't care. Those people, their consultants, they don't want Trump to win. Right? They want an illusion that the conservatives are fighting for this, but no. What they want is they want to be able to pick who's the next guy so they can represent them and make $50 million from their failed campaign. I knew Ron DeSantis' campaign wasn't going anywhere because I'd spent weeks with him. I'd argue that there was probably no one that did more campaign events with Ron DeSantis in person in 2018 that wasn't a paid person than me. So I knew, and they're seeing all the memes and this, I was like, oh, so you hired an influencer. I was like, just wait till they see him in long form. Meaning anyone can look like a badass in a 5-second clip, and then you add in a bunch of special effects, and it's like you're dunking on some moron local reporter that doesn't know what they're talking about, and everyone gets paid to promote it and I go, just wait. No, seriously, give him the mic for 30 seconds. And you notice, the second he got the mic for more than 30 seconds, it was over because he doesn't have that. Eventually, in this world, you got to be the guy up on that stage. You got to be the guy willing to do this, not the guy that sits there and can't answer the most obvious question of the debate. What do you think about the weaponization? Is it a big deal? The weaponization of our government against their political rivals? I don't know. Where are my consultants? Can we poll test this? Where are my donors? What would the billionaires that are funding my campaign because we have no small dollar operation because it's not real? Where are they on this issue? Remember that one from the first debate? Fear. Where do I go? It's like a no-brainer. If you can't figure that out, you shouldn't be making decisions for anyone. But that's what we're up against. That's the consultant class. That's the Washington elite. They have almost as much disdain for hardworking Americans as the Democrats do. Democrats, if you're a hardworking blue-collar American, so you're an idiot. Well, you'll still get the UAW leadership vote because they've been bought and paid for by the workers' dues and given to the Democrat Party while they simultaneously take your job and your American dream and ship it to China for electric vehicles. But they're still going for it. I think a lot of those voters, that's based on and those workers who are union dues-paying members. Notice Trump got a lot more of those people than Joe Biden did. But it doesn't matter. They're literally giving a huge portion of their paycheck to the union that's giving it to Democrats who are literally destroying their very existence. And that's DC in a nutshell. That's what's going on. So we need to get back there and we got to actually fight. And that's why they're going after Trump the way they are. They're going after my father the way they are now because they understand that he's the only guy that will actually do that. Everyone talks about it, right? We will bring peace to the Middle East. I was like, yeah, I don't know. I'm 45. I've been hearing that for 45 years, and it was going on for a long time before that. Why is Trump the only guy that can actually get it done? Same thing about Roe v. Wade, overturning that and getting people who will actually do it, not people that'll be bullied into folding. Same thing with the embassy and moving it to Jerusalem. Remember that one? That was going to be the start of World War III. Why? Because incompetent bureaucrats who'd never accomplished anything said it would be. Right? And they tried instilling fear so we don't do something that we want. So we don't follow through on our promise. They put political pressure. The resolve it took to override that political pressure is not to be underestimated. Okay, that's not easy. I get that. What ended up happening? It's like two people threw rocks for like 30 seconds and it was over and it was done. Finally, someone got a promise done. Right? North Korea. How? Trump is doing it all wrong. I remember watching the news for like 2 years every morning. Trump's doing it all wrong in North Korea. And then, they have their experts. I'm like, well, why are you an expert? Because I've been leading the delegation in fighting North Korea. Like, well, so what have you accomplished? Well, we have done a lot. Please, no, have you met with the guy? No, why would we do that? I mean, it's crazy. They can't even get in the room because they're incapable. They're morons. Okay? Our Secretary of State, who was given the job as a handout because he was the one that orchestrated getting 52 intelligence officers to sign off that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation, Anthony Blinken, he became our Secretary of State. Not because he's good at what he does. He's obviously an imbecile, as evidenced by the results, but he was rewarded that position because he gathered those people to lie, to sway an election. Again, election interference seems to be a really big problem for the Democrats, but not when they're doing it. That's different. When radical leftist activists take over courthouses in Seattle, Portland, when they storm Speaker McCarthy's office, that's not an insurrection. That's different. It's in the name of social justice or something. There's always an excuse. Okay? Blinken. The adults are back in charge, we were told, when these people took over, right? I remember after the botched Afghan withdrawal, our Secretary of State, sort of our biggest diplomat abroad, got on a world stage and before Congress and said he is shocked and dismayed that the Taliban, whom we'd been fighting for by 20 years, so we kind of know them by this point, you would think, but shocked and dismayed that the Taliban did not install a more diverse and inclusive government in Afghanistan. I was like, if you're dismayed, fine. You're shocked? Did you think there was going to be like a trans coalition in the Taliban? Probably not, right? Probably. They weren't going to bring like Leah Thomas, the male swimmer who won every NCAA record in swimming because he decided to become a Shia about 15 minutes before nationals, right? They're not probably giving that guy a seat at the table. This was a group of people that threw homosexuals off buildings for 20 years. We knew that. But we're shocked. They don't look at the idiocy of our politicians and mimic them. Like, we're shocked. Same people that left them $87 billion worth of equipment, the same people that want to ban you from having an AR-15, left the Taliban, like, what was it, 75,000 or something? M4 fully automatic machine guns, and tanks and Humvees and like missiles, like, whatever. You realize how far we've fallen when you see these things. I remember when that one was going on, I picked up my son from school. We're going to do a father-son dinner. He was 9, I think, 8 or 9 at the time. I guess he was 9. Hey, Dad, why would we leave the Taliban? 84, 86, whatever it was, $1 billion worth of equipment? It's a good question, son. I got nothing for you. Like, my son thought I was an idiot because he was like, what do you mean? Like, why on earth would we do? Hey, Dad, why did they pull out, like, our soldiers before, like, our civilians and, like, the people who helped us? I don't understand. It's like, that's a legitimate question, son. Yes, you're right. I don't know. I'm not going to be one of these woke, when you see these people on TV, my 2-year-old spoke to me about nuclear proliferation on the Korean Peninsula, and they were shocked and dismayed. Like, he didn't know what biometric was, but he knew that we had left them machines that could scan, like when we go through, clear or something like that. Then he didn't know what the word biometric was, but he knew that we left the Taliban, who'd we been at war with for 20 years, machines that could scan and figure out who was bad and who was on our side and who was good. And we gave that to the people who they were at war with for 20 years. And he couldn't believe it. My 9-year-old understood this. And the adults that were back in charge didn't. So it's pretty simple, guys. We need to get together. We need to fight back. We need to say enough is enough. And we need to be unafraid. Because if you think it's bad now, just wait. Just give these guys the time. They've shown everything's on the table, right? I mean, it's not like, they just want to limit a little bit of your Second Amendment. They'd get rid of it entirely. But it's not just the Second Amendment. If you've been watching, your First Amendment's on the table. And it has been for a long time. By the way, all of this stuff has probably been going on, but Trump derangement syndrome made them say the quiet parts out loud, finally. Okay? I imagine we'd fallen much further than any one of us could have ever understood. You know what may have been our saving grace? Probably COVID. Because the same teachers that wanted to shut down our schools, the same people that would label concerned parents domestic terrorists, they had to teach from computers. And parents could walk by and be like, you're learning what? Schools that are graduating classes of people that have zero proficiency in English, zero proficiency in math. There was a solid couple hours of the trans curriculum every week. It may be one of the great cell phones of our time, because now people finally understand what's probably been going on much longer than we could ever believe or imagine. But now that we know that, okay, we got to stop turning the other cheek. We got to stop living and let live. These people would end us. They would throw you each in the gulags. If you're in this room right now, you're on a list. It's not just me. I'm on every list. Just by being in this room, you're on some. And I'm not saying that jokingly. But that's how far it's come. So it's great to see this. It's great to see what Christian has done with the Texas Youth Summit. I love that they're working with Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA, because that's what we need to do. We see that so much. Well, I just want to control faction, and this is my little power play. No, we got to get together and we got to fight, because the enemy that we are up against is truly sick. It's truly deranged, and we need to fight for what is right, and we must never, ever relent. So Texas, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Just please stay in the game, okay? Thank you, guys.
All right, everybody. That, of course, was Donald Trump Jr. That was his speech last night. Absolute fire coming from him and all of the speakers, really. But we had some amazing interviews. Annabella, I wanted to ask you if do you have a favorite interview, or maybe a couple if you can't narrow it down to one?
It's so hard to pick a favorite. We spoke to so many fabulous, fantastic people, and I'm so inspired by all the young people so involved, running for Congress, getting involved on their campuses. I mean, I have to say, I loved speaking to Riley Gaines, especially as a fellow athlete, and hearing what she had to say and what she's doing.
Yeah.
What about you?
You know, there was something at the tail end of our interview with her that I think bears repeating and reinforcing, because she was talking about some of these lawsuits from people like Chloe Cole towards the very, very irresponsible doctors who perform these operations on them as minors. And if that's not medical malpractice, condemning someone to a life of confusion when in many of these instances they detransition, but the psychological damage that is associated with the original transition and then the detransition, until more people start doing what Chloe Cole is doing and suing and making it